Without further ado, we begin with Chapter 1, The Void. It was dark, yet for him it was comforting. His life had been spent in darkness for as long as he could care to remember, so it was well suited that this was where his death would be. It was a weird feeling. He felt like he was everywhere, but he couldn't feel himself being attached to anything. Like he had no body, only his mind and soul. He then started to remember everything, from his youth to his first kill, to his acceptance into the Brotherhood, and all events up until his death. He knew he was dead. He remembered the faces of his brothers and sister, who met him once he entered the small cottage. He had begged them to see reason. He didn't hate them, but he was sad that they couldn't see the truth. That he was loyal to the Dread Father, with all his being, but the liar's workings had succeeded before his silencer could come to his aid. He let an ethereal sigh loose. Oh well, it mattered little now. The void had him now. It's where he wished to be. It was close to Sithis. It was Sithis, and Sithis was the void. He felt happy and comfortable that he would be able to serve Sithis in the afterlife, even if he wished he could continue to serve him with his life. He then became aware of something, a buildup of energy that he seemed to be coming closer to, or it was coming closer to him. It was difficult to tell. He also started to feel more centralized in himself. He didn't feel any physical being in himself, but he felt like his soul was more together now. He couldn't see, hear, taste, smell, or even feel, but just sense. The energy nearby, it felt familiar and alien. He felt its presence before in life, but it was so close now. It felt malevolent and cruel, but he also felt pride from it, strong pride towards him. He felt himself getting excited. He was sure that this was the Dread Father. He felt something more now, a will being pressed on him. Sithis did not speak with words, but somehow he felt he knew everything he wanted. And he felt something radiate with self-pride. Even in death, his Dread Father wished him to work his will. He felt himself centralize more. It was like he could feel again, but not quite. It was difficult to describe what it was like. I'm sorry. Yes, Ditzy Muffin, enjoy your popcorn. Then Sithis stopped pressing his will into him, and he suddenly felt like he was being torn apart and was sent somewhere new. The pain of his soul being torn and put back together was blinding and deafening, and when he already couldn't really feel, see, or hear. And he became unaware again, but his last thoughts were that he felt from the Dread Father, that his work wasn't done. He was being sent somewhere new. The will of the Dread Father Sithis would be spread to another world, and he, Lucian LaChance, would be the one to spread it. Chapter 2, Equestria. He started to feel again. It was a strange and foreign feeling at first, like being born again, suddenly going from nothingness to everything. His body was solid once more. Blood, flesh, hair, and bone were now one with his mind and soul once more. The body felt foreign now, too. It felt like a mere moment in time that he was in the void. But it felt like he hasn't been a physical being in thousands of years. His mind and soul and body slowly reacquainted with one another, and he took in a hard breath. Air being needed once more in, for how long he didn't know. He shook his head and slowly started to remember everything. His life, his death, and the wordless orders of Sithis that still rang in his skull. He felt his new muscles stretch in his body. His dread father had given him a new body. In a new world, as he breathed in deeply once again, he began to notice smells, flowers, and other smells of the wilds. He felt a breeze on him, and he heard the noises of other life. He slowly started to open his eyes and close them against the light. He slowly began to adjust his new eyes to the light and looked around as he tried to move his muscles. He looked to be in the clearing of a small wooded area. It reminded him of the wilderness near Shadenhall, but something seemed odd about this body. It wasn't just getting used to a physical body again. It seemed strange. He never felt a body like this. He turned his head and looked at his new body, and his eyes widened. He was a horse. His mind tried to register this. When he heard the will of Sithis, he remembered something. It somehow made sense. He was supposed to be a horse. That's what the populace of this world was. But that raised another question in his mind. Why would Sithis send him to such a world? The Dread Father seemed to have told him the bare minimum of what he needed to know. He didn't question at the time, because he didn't understand it. And when it was being said, but felt he would when the time came. Mind still filled with questions, the newly reborn Lucien Lachance pushed himself up. Excuse me. Can we get a little not that? Thank you. Started to get used to his new body. Once he was standing, he started to move. Taking a step forward, he started to walk. It was slow going, but he was getting used to it quickly. He smiled to himself. So far, so good, he said. Surprising himself, he hadn't expected to be able to talk. Was this normal for this world? Or was it a gift from Sithis? He put the thoughts to the back of his mind and refocused himself on learning to walk again. He would find out later. He started to move faster and got himself into a run and started to run around in the clearing he was in. He stopped and practiced kneeling and getting back up, moving each individual hoof and getting used to his new body as a whole. He then stopped, smiling at his success in his new body, and had another look around. Taking a more focused look, he saw what seemed to be a town in the distance, and a farmhouse nearby. Even from this distance, he could see the speckles on the trees. He licked his lips, knowing they were apple trees. It had been so long since he had a juicy red apple. He made his way to the farm. He would figure out a way to pay them later, or perhaps just steal one, though he hated the idea of being impolite when he just came to this world. He liked to think of himself as a gentleman, even if he did dedicate his life to murder in the name of Sithis. It was just so infrequent that he met anyone else in his profession, or family for that matter, who had a similar mentality. Perhaps he could come to some agreement with the owners of the farm. On his way there, he passed by a shallow pool of water. He walked over and leaned to take a short drink, and then looked at his reflection. His eyes were black, as was his fur and his mane. He smiled to himself, happy that if he was to be a horse for this life, that his colors suited him. He also made note of his other features. He wasn't exactly a horse in appearance. He had much larger eyes than a normal horse, and his facial structure was capable of a much wider variety of emotion, almost human-like. Perhaps it wouldn't be so difficult to cope with. He looked over his body again and noticed a mark on his flank. It was in the shape of a drop of water, but green in color, like a drop of poison. He wondered if it was something given to him by Sithis. He pondered this for a moment before his stomach growled, reminding him of his original goal. He continued on his way to the farm, contemplating how he was going to trade for the apples, maybe by working for them. Farms were often in need of workers. He got there a few minutes later and looked around. Not seeing anyone, he went to the front door of the house and raised his hoof to knock on the door. Things seemed to be becoming more and more natural to him. After a few minutes, the door opened and he found himself looking into the green eyes of an orange pony. He was able to control himself from recoiling in shock at the sight, but he was surprised at the sight of such a strange color of a creature. "Can I help you?" the orange pony asked with a feminine voice. It broke Lucian out of his musings. Yes, I'm sorry if I'm disturbing you, miss, but I was interested in a few of your apples." "I don't have any money, but I'd be glad to work for them," he said. I was still strange to them. Oh, it was still strange to him to be talking to a pony of all things, but he was always one who could keep his cool in any situation, and it wouldn't serve Sithis if he went insane. The orange pony looked thoughtful for a second and then smiled. "Sure, we could use an extra hoof on the farm for the next couple of days," she said. "I think we could work something out. Come on in. We're just sitting down for lunch." Lucian smiled back at her. "Much appreciated. I promise I'm a hard worker," he told her. "If it's not too late to introduce myself, my name is Lucian LaChance. It's a pleasure to meet you," he said. She opened the door for him and invited him inside. "Pleasure's all mine, Mr. LaChance. Name's Applejack. Let me introduce you to the family," she said, leading him into the dining room. There they got the attention of the ponies that were excuse me, at the table eating. One was a large red one, male if Lucian were to chance a guess, a small yellow one with a ribbon in her hair, and a green elderly one who didn't seem too intent on him. Probably could barely tell he was there. Applejack pointed out the red one first. "That there's my big brother Big Macintosh," she said. "And this here's my little sister Applebloom and Granny Smith," she said, pointing to the small yellow pony, and then the old one respectively. Lucian smiled and nodded to them all. "A pleasure to meet you all. I'm Lucian LaChance. I intend to work here for the next few days in exchange for some apples," he said, introducing himself. This earned him a nod from Big Macintosh, while Granny Smith seemed to be falling asleep. The one named Applebloom, however, had come over to him and began asking questions. "Wow, it's nice to meet ya, Mr. Lucian," she said. "Where you from? You got any friends? Where you staying?" She asked one question after another. Lucian just smiled. Now, Applebloom, it's impolite to ask a hungry pony. Oh, excuse me, wrong character. Now, Applebloom, it's impolite to ask a hungry pony so many questions. Applejack lightly scowled. "Now then, would you care to join us for lunch before we get to work, Mr. LaChance?" he asks her. Lucian smiled to her. "I'd be very pleased," he said, taking a seat when Applejack offered him one. "You sure do talk fancy, Mr. Lucian," chimed in Applebloom again. Applejack put a piece of apple pie in front of Colt. "Okay. Rarity would just love to meet you. I'll take you into town after work. Get you introduced to every pony in Ponyville," she said. Lucian smiled to her. That sounds fine. Indeed it did. He could learn who everyone was and maybe find a few potential Dark brothers and sisters. His first goal before beginning to spread the fear of the Dreadfather was to find a listener. He would also need to build a shrine for the Night Mother. An epitaph of the lucky lady would suffice. If these ponies can build houses, he was sure there was somewhere that could make the sculpture. He shook himself from his plans and ate the pie, enjoying the taste of the apples within. The family made small talk while they ate. Once they were finished, Applejack, Big Macintosh, and himself went outside to get to work. Lucien had to admit, these ponies were able to do a lot without the help of hands and fingers. It was a curious sight, bucking the trees to make the apples fall, but it worked out fine. They bucked a couple dozen trees, and the sun looked like it was going to go down soon. "Well, I reckon that's enough for today. Good work there, Mr. LeChance," Applejack congratulated. "Thank you, Applejack," he said with a smile. "It's always good to work. It's been a while since I've had the joy of doing so much," he said, stretching his sore muscles. "You still up for going into town?" she asked him. Lucien nodded. "I am. I'm looking forward to meeting everyone. I'm not from around here, to be honest. I have no clue where I am," he said. Applejack nodded. "Well, this here is Sweet Apple Acres, the Apple family farm of Ponyville, in the country of Equestria. The rest I guess you'll have to study up on," she said. "My friend Twilight lives in the library in town. I'm sure you can look into all you'll need to get there," she suggested. Lucien smiled more and agreed. "Sounds like an idea to me, Miss Applejack." "Just Applejack's fine. Now let's go. We're wasting daylight." Chapter 3. Twilight. A lavender-colored mare with violet-covered hair, with a pink stripe running through it, was tossing in bed. It was a little past midday. She usually didn't sleep in this late, but she was up all night studying a strange book she bought from a traveling sales pony. The pony didn't even know he had the book in his inventory until she pointed it out. She got it for only a couple of bits. It was odd. It was about a being she had never heard of before, referred to only as the Dread Father throughout the entire book. From what she could gather, this being wasn't so much a deity as it was an embodiment of death and cruelty. It was frightening, but intrigued her to no end. When she finally decided to go to sleep, she was plagued with strange dreams of death and of a dark pony she didn't recognize. And she heard the words, "Welcome home." Giving up on sleep, the pony named Twilight Sparkle got out of her bed and went to the first floor of her library home. Spike had woken up and gone out already to run errands and to go see Rarity. It was rare when Spike woke up before Twilight. He was sure to tease her about it a little later. She went to the small kitchen in her home and made a quick meal, and then went to where she left the book the night before. As obsessed as she's become with the book, she has yet to figure it out. What was its purpose? Who wrote it? She let out a sigh and used her magic to close it. "I'll get back to it later," she said to no pony in particular. She headed to the door. "Maybe a walk will help me clear my head," she thought aloud, leaving her home and heading towards Fluttershy's house. Maybe she could get some tea there to help her sleep. Fluttershy seemed to know a few herbs and mixtures. Maybe she could even confide in her soft-spoken friend. Twilight thought about how the shy Pegasus would respond to the subject of a book about an unknown embodiment of death. She shook her head. That wasn't a good idea. Twilight came to Fluttershy's small house on the edge of the Everfree Forest. She went to the door and knocked, and heard the soft voice of her friend inside. "Yes?" "Fluttershy, it's me, Twilight. Can I come in?" she asked. A few seconds later, the door was unlocked and opened, a yellow Pegasus holding the door open for her. "Oh, hello, Twilight. Yes,
please come in,"
the quiet pony said, inviting Twilight inside, closing the door behind her.
"What can I do for you today? You look pretty tired,"
she commented, noting Twilight's exhausted appearance. Twilight nodded.
"I had some trouble getting to sleep last night. I don't suppose you would know anything that would help me get to sleep, would you?"
she asked her. Fluttershy thought for a moment and fluttered to her kitchen and started to look through her cabinets and brought out a small bag with some crushed herbs in it.
"Oh, you can mix this with tea before bed. It's a little bitter, but it'll help put you to sleep,"
she suggested.
"But be careful not to put too much in,"
she warned.
I can be dangerous."
Wait, what? Oh, I'm sorry? Wait, what? I think that was meant to say it can be dangerous. I don't think Fluttershy, I don't think she meant to say I can be dangerous. Fluttershy was the most dangerous of all the ponies. Ha ha ha! Well, Twilight looked to her.
"Well, okay then. How much is too much?"
she asked, a little curious as to why Fluttershy had murderous intents.
Well, I got it from Sakura. Angel was having a little trouble sleeping. She said that about 1/4 of a teaspoon would be enough to help a pony sleep. Oh, but Angel needed much, much less. And she warned me about what could go wrong with a dose that's too large. So I used a little bit less than what she suggested. But it works really well. Angel had the first good sleep he had in a long time,"
Fluttershy explained. Twilight looked at the small bag of herbs.
"So what happens if too much is put in?"
she asked. Fluttershy looked down, the subject making her uncomfortable.
Sakura said that if some pony had too much, they wouldn't wake up,"
she said. Twilight visibly gulped at the thought of going to sleep forever.
Excuse me. I think I'll use about half of what Sakura suggests for ponies,"
she said with a bit of a forced smile, taking the bag. Fluttershy smiled and nodded.
Oh, I understand. It should be more than enough. I'm sure you'll be fine,"
she said. They continued to having small talk, though the entire time Twilight's thought kept going back to that line about why Fluttershy had to say she was dangerous. Fluttershy's not dangerous at all. Also, she was thinking about the Book of the Dead Father, but that's besides the point. She still wasn't sure why she was so interested in the subject. It was frightening, both the book and her obsession with it. She thought deeply while Fluttershy was speaking. Maybe Sakura would know more about it. It was a long shot, but Twilight felt she needed to know more. The sun was getting low in the sky when Twilight decided to head back home. She took the bag of sleeping herb with her and said goodbye to her dangerous friend, and then went back into town. Maybe she would page through the book a little bit before trying some of the urban tea. As she was walking through town, she spotted another friend of hers, Applejack, with a pony she's never seen before. He was black in color, with a black mane and eyes. He seemed very mysterious. And why was he with Applejack, she wondered. Applejack saw her and waved to her, inviting her to come closer, probably to meet the strange new pony. Twilight made her way to them, curiosity momentarily overwhelming her sleep-deprived exhaustion. Lucien looked to the lavender pony that was approaching them. She piqued his interest. He had noticed the unicorns and Pegasi, though he wasn't sure what it all meant. Besides the obvious physical differences and the ability to fly by the latter, but there was something strange about this one. She was obviously tired. He also noted that her horn was glowing, as was the bag floating beside her. He was sure they were related. He would look into it later. Twilight came to the two earth ponies and greeted her friend before turning to the stranger.
"Hello there. My name is Twilight Sparkle. You're new here, aren't you?"
She introduced herself with a friendly smile. Lucian smiled to her. "It's a pleasure, Twilight Sparkle," he said. "My name is Lucien Lachance," he told her, "and I am new here. I wandered in, and Applejack gave me a job for a few days," he said. "This is a lovely place, though. Perhaps I can make it my new home." Twilight gave him another smile.
"Well, every pony here is very friendly. I'm sure you won't have any trouble making new friends here," she said.
The dark pony gave a smirk and offered his hoof in greeting. "I'm off to a good start, I think," he said. Twilight took his hoof in hers and locked eyes with him. She felt an odd sense of familiarity with him, and she thought to the dream she had last night. She shook herself from those thoughts as Lucian looked to the bag she was carrying with her magic. "What do you have here?" he asked her. "Oh, you've got to go? All right. Goodbye, Crypto. I will continue reading for a little bit longer. I don't think I'm going to be able to read all of this, but I think I'll read until at least a good stopping point, and you'll be able to see this all later on YouTube, so take care. Okay. She looked to the bag as well, and moved it for him to get a closer look. He studied the bag and recognized quickly what it was. It was an ingredient that was found in Langorwine poison. Langorwine poison? I guess, yeah. The ingredient itself was dangerous, but added with others, it could be used to make a false death. Perfect for when someone owed a lot of money. He was a little surprised that it could be used as a sleep aid in small doses, and horses may have a much stronger tolerance to such things. He would need to experiment some time.
"Well, I wish you a good night's sleep tonight, then. And if I recall, Applejack told me you lived in a library."
"Oh, I'm sorry, wrong person. Well, I wish you a good night's sleep tonight, then. And if I recall, Applejack told me you lived in a library. I could use a few books to study on the history of this land. And I would also like a book on biology and botany, if you have them," he requested. Twilight thought for a moment.
"I'm sure I have some books you could use. Let's go see if we can find them,"
she said, leading the way to her home. The large tree which served as her residence was only a little ways away, and Twilight quickly invited the two inside. Lucien looked around in the library. It was wonderful. He loved reading, mostly learning different ways to kill a person. But it was good to know the history of the country you plan to kill in. "This is wonderful. Have you read them all?" he asked her. A blush of embarrassed pride crossed her face as Twilight proudly proclaimed,
"Almost. There are a few I haven't gotten around to yet," she said.
She went to the shelves and started to look through books that would answer the Lucian's request. While she was looking through them, the dark pony went over to a nearby desk and found an old book with a worn leather binding. "And where did you find a book like this?" he asked her. Opening the cover, he felt his heart leap. It was a book on the Dread Father. His legend was already present here. Though the book seemed ancient, it was probably regarded as forgotten legend. Twilight looked to him to see the book he was talking about.
"Oh, I just got that the other day. It's very interesting, though I haven't been able to make much sense of it,"
she admitted. "The Dark Legend of the Dread Father," he read the title aloud. "I have to say I'm familiar with this. Perhaps you and I can discuss it in length sometime," he suggested. She looked at him excitedly.
You read it before? She asked. That's great news. Maybe you can help me finally understand it. I think it's half the reason I need this herb to help me sleep, she said, embarrassed a little that she had to admit she wasn't able to figure it out on her own. Applejack watched the exchange and rose an eyebrow. Legend of the Dread what now? She asked, a little confused. She was by no means a dumb pony, but she wasn't what could be called bookish. Lucian smiled to her. It's nothing of consequence, he assured the confused farm pony. He looked back to Twilight. She was obsessed with the legend. Perhaps he could use this to his advantage. An unhealthy obsession could be manipulated very easily, and he certainly needed new brothers and sisters in this world. But that could be addressed later. Now, let's gather up those books. It's getting quite late. I'm sure we prefer not to walk home in the dark, he said. The lavender pony nodded and went back to gathering the books. She got him a rudimentary book on history, one of biology, and another on botany. She also picked out a few books on local legends and the like. She figured they would help him understand the local culture. Once all the books were gathered together, she grabbed up a spare saddlebag and put it on his back. And the books inside. There. That should do it. If you need anything more, please feel free to ask, she said with a smile. And I look forward to what you can tell me about the Dreadfather, she said, a little excited about the subject. It was always great to find another pony who was interested and knowledgeable in old, mysterious legends. It will be my pleasure to teach you, the dark pony said. Neither Twilight nor Applejack noticed the slight change in pitch in his voice. It was small, but it was a habit that Lucian had, even in his previous life. When something got him excited, his voice would get deeper and crack a little. He always got most excited, either right before a kill, or when he was inviting another into the Dark Brotherhood. I wish you a good night, and pleasant dreams, Miss Sparkle, he said, bidding her farewell. She smiled to him. And good night to you, Mr. LeChance, she said, before saying goodbye to Applejack as well. Her mind was thinking of the dark and mysterious Lucian LeChance. As the two of them walked out of her home, she went to her desk and began reading the book once more. Lucian and Applejack were walking through Ponyville. The sun was just going down, and the moon was rising. Well, I think you and Twilight get along rather well, the orange farm pony teased lightly. Lucian chuckled a little. She's a smart one. I can tell that just by talking with her. It's sad to say I've met only a few who are as interesting, he commented. She smirked. A couple of bookworms like you two getting together. Should I come along to make sure you two behave? She teased. Lucian returned her smirk. I don't believe that would be necessary, Applejack. She and I are both adults. I don't think we need a chaperone, he told her. Applejack just smirked as they went on.